Oh, I think we're gonna read a story today, cousins and other people. Need a cup of tea to get started. Tommy! Thank you. You really should get that face checked out. And let's see what books we should do. Ooh, one of my favorites. Okay, let's see. This story is called The Wild Christmas Reindeer by Ian Brett. Oops. Jan Brett. The Wild Christmas Reindeer. Tika was excited and a little afraid. This year, Santa had asked her to get the
Let's do this.
her to get the reindeer ready to fly on Christmas Eve. Tika had never done this before, and she wanted everything to be perfect. Tika lived up in the Arctic in the shadow of Santa's winter farm. The last of the snow geese had flown south, and everyone's mind was on Christmas. The workshop was alive with the sounds of saws sawing, hammers hammering, and brushes painting as they all worked to have the toys and the presents ready for delivery on Christmas Eve. Tika knew it was time for her to go in search of the reindeer. They had been out of the tundra, wild and free, since last Christmas, and Tika was sure they would want to go back to Winter Farm to train. She would have to be strong and firm. At last, she found them: Bramble and Heather, Windwest and Lynchen, Snowball, Crag, Twilight, and Tundra. Tika took a deep breath and shouted out, "Let's go, move, move, move." The reindeers were bewildered by Tika's voice. Their heads went up to see who this loud creature was, but they let her herd them together, and he headed back toward Winter Farm. Tundra gave her the most trouble. Tika didn't know that he considered himself the leader and was not used to being bossed around. He liked to stay next to Twilight, and she was separated from him and running near the front. When they got to the barn, Tika put them in different stalls. Tundra snorted impatiently. By the next morning, when Tika went into the barn, all the reindeer were restless and upset. Lynchen was frightening, and Crag, who kept nipping at him. Bramble was so worried she drove Heather wild, and Twilight kept calling out to Tundra, who was just plain angry and stamping his hoofs. Tika groomed each reindeer. She wanted them to look sleek and glossy for Santa's one by one. She brushed and combed their coat and pushed and pulled at their tangled manes and brushed so long and hard that their ears started to turn pink. Tika took the reindeer outside. Now she was ready for the real training to begin. Snowflakes danced in the air as she tried to stand them into lines and put on their harnesses. But they wouldn't line up. She had put Tendra at the back with Heather instead of at the front with Twilight. So he kicked out at Heather, who then bolted into Bramble. Tika scolded, and "Reindeer, don't move," she cried, but they all ran off, wild-eyed, and had to go after them and bring them back. The next day, Tika harnessed the reindeer in the barn, taking them out into the snow. Everything went right until she got them lined up outside and tried to steer them first to the left and then to the right. To make the sleigh fly and would need to pull together smoothly, but everything went wrong. Tendra crashed into Heather. Snowball blew up a bramble. Wind swept, knocked over Twilight, and then Lynchen locked antlers with Crag. "Stop," Tika cried as she watched the reindeer paw in the hair. "Unhook," she shouted as they tried to free their long antlers. Then Lynchen and Crag fell over into the snow. The harder they pulled, the more their antlers locked, and reindeers were frantic, and Tika only made it worse by yelling at them. Tendra and Heather rushed to help, but antlers did not break free. White Sweat nudged, and Lencha and Bramble ran to help Crag, but the more they tried to help, the more they got. Muscles bulged, but their antlers did not budge. Tika wailed, "Ow! Ooh! Please, it's almost Christmas Eve." But the reindeers could not move. A frost silence hung in the air. Tika looked at the tangled reindeer, once so bold and free, and began to cry. "It's my fault," she said. "I've spent all my time yelling at you instead of helping. I'm sorry." And one by one, she gave each reindeer a hug. "Tomorrow," she said, We'll go to work in a new way. No yelling, no screaming, and no bossing, I promise. Let me try to help you get free. The reindeers listened to this new voice. Heather's eyes sparkled, Crags cracked a reindeer grin, Bramble giggled, and Snowball sighed. Tundra laughed, and Twilight smiled. The more they laughed, and the more they shook, and as they shook, their antlers rattled and rubbed, and before Tika could do anything, she heard a spring sprung sound. It was the antlers jiggling free. Quietly, Tika led the reindeer back to the barn. She sleeked their coats and gently brushed their ears and combed out their mini tundra nuzzles her cheek. The next day, the reindeer lined up in 2 lines, ready for harness. With Twilight and Tundra leading the line, they practiced turning left and they practiced turning right. Tika directed them softly. Tundra pulled them tightly. Twilight Brumble was directed them softly, gently to Lichen. Windwest helped Heather and Snowball nestle against Krog together, and they practiced long and hard. They didn't notice that it was getting dark, and they almost didn't hear a jingle. In the distance, it was Santa standing by the sleigh, piled high with presents and ready to go. Now the reindeer were ready too, and Tika led them to the sleigh. Santa smiled and nodded his thanks. Then he climbed aboard and waved to Tika, who watched as the wild reindeer rose up together and carried the sleigh off into the night. And that is the end of